Dr. Anand Ramanan, President of Sri Ramana Ashram, to give a few thoughts.
Antaryasya bahir vidutatimram jyotirmayam shashvatam sthanam prapi virajate vinamatam ajnanam unmulayan pashyan vishmapita mullasadi yo vishvashapare paraha tasmai Sri Ramanaya lokagurve shokasya hantre namaha tuppari villa ippirappenpayan uppidavayen Arunachala. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to all the mumukshus and to the blessed Atmans gathered here. I am so happy and privileged to be invited by Mohanji of Arunachala Ashrama and the other executive members of Arunachala Ashrama. And thank you for celebrating the centenary event of Ramanasramam in such a grand manner amidst all our devotees. For an organization is only as strong as the sum of its parts. And I'm always proud to say we have some of the ripest spiritual minds that can ever exist anywhere. And thank you for carrying on the legacy of our Arunachala Bhakta Bhagavata and Dennis Hartel with such dedication and devotion. Swamiji, it's a privilege to have you amidst us today. Your deep knowledge, unflappable calmness, intense bhakti, and rare humility have made you the perfect messenger for the lofty teachings of Sanatana Dharma to prevail everywhere. I've had the privilege of listening in silence, in late night, your discourses online. And probably I've interacted once with you over the Zoom, but this is the first time. And it's a great privilege to meet you in person as all of us. And as he said in his talk, when you see such a right person, it just brings a fragrance to the whole gathering. And your presence today is the highlight of this event. And I mean it reverently. Friends, the topic I have chosen today is our twin topics. Of course, they merge seamlessly into one. The purpose of Bhagavan Ramana's incarnation and why he is the greatest spiritual teacher. And I will refer to Sri Ramana Maharshi as Bhagavan, as we all know him that way. And Bhagavan is the incarnation of Dakshinamurti and Adi Shankara. Friends, I'm not making this up, being his great-grandnephew or the president of the ashram. I'm going to quote Bhagavan Ramana himself. And there is an invocation sloka composed by Bhagavan himself in the Tamil translation of Shankara's Dakshinamurti Shotram. And I promise you this is the only one I'm going to read. I'll just read the translations going forward, as I know you're all hungry. So it reads, Mannuva Munivar Shanti Mannave, Tenmuka Murtiyai Tigalndu Monamam, Thannillai Tigal Ita Tudiyir Tanmayam, Sonnava Shankaran Tunnum Ennule. And the meaning is, Shankara, that's Lord Shiva, who appears as Dakshinamurti to grant peace to the great ascetics who revealed his true state of silence and who expressed the nature of the self, in this hymn abides in me. And similarly, Bhagavan's invocation sloka for his Tamil translation of Adi Shankara's Atma Bodham, I'll just read the translation. Can Shankara, the enlightener of the self, be different from one's own self? Who but he does this day, abiding as the inmost self in me, say this in Tamil language? So, friends, we see that Bhagavan in his own Chastamar declares that Shankara and Dakshinamurti are nothing but manifestations of one's own self, and that it is Shankara himself abiding in him as Ramana Maharshi, who composed the Tamil translation of his Sanskrit works. The purpose of Bhagavan's incarnation was to restore and adapt the ancient path of Atma Vichara, or self enquiry, to the modern conditions. In ancient times, it had been a path, as Swamiji said, for serious seekers to go into caves and spend their whole lifetime there and in constant meditation. It was reserved for a heroic few who could strive in solitude, withdrawn from the world, in constant meditation. Now, as we expect, this practice therefore became increasingly rare over time and almost disappeared. And what Bhagavan did was, he restored it in a new form by combining it with Karma Yoga in such a way that this could be used in the conditions of the modern world, since it requires no ritual or outer forms of worship. It is in fact the most ideal method for the needs of our times. And here are Bhagavan's own words in verse 8 of his devotional hymn to Arunachala Navamanimalai, declaring the purpose of his descent on earth. And again, as we know it, Bhuvikul, all the people who know the Tamil Parayanam, it starts with Bhuvikul, and I will go to the translation. I was born in the holy Tiruchuri, the seat of Bhuminadeshwara, renowned throughout the world, to the virtuous Sundara and his faithful wife Sundari, in order that Shiva, the absolute consciousness, might shine forth and the self flourish, and that I might be rescued from the misery of the world and the snares of the despicable senses. The Lord of Red Hill, Arunachala, raised me to his state. This is a very affirmative statement by Bhagavan. And it's not just for him. Bhagavan, nothing that a jnani says is for him. As Swamiji said, they will leave the body in 21 days. So why did he keep that body for 54 years? It's for all of us. It's both aspirational and inspirational. So that, as one writer said, the Bhagavan Ramana didn't come on this earth to form a new religion or show how great he is. He came to make us all Ramanas like him, like the mirror image of him. So, now I'm going to go to his life, the essence of his life, and this whole life actually, Atma Vichara, or self enquiry. The foundation of the self enquiry, as taught by Bhagavan, lies in the principles of Advaita Vedanta. The core teaching of Vedanta is that we are all the pure self, pure consciousness, Satchitananda. But we chose to identify ourselves with body and mind in ajnana or ignorance. And the goal of life, the whole of human birth, is to attain the self. Bhagavan said, quote, "Your own self-realization is the greatest service you can render to the world." And he was categorical about that. He must have said this several thousand times. The way to attain the self, is through self-enquiry. Bhagavan taught us all that karma marga leads to chitta shuddhi, mental purification, but it does not confer mukti. Only vichara or self-enquiry can lead to the permanent release. In verse 11 of Viveka Chudamani, Adi Shankara also says the same thing. Again, quote, "Work leads to purification of the mind, not to the perception of reality. The realization of truth is brought about by vichara and not in the least by even 10 million actions. Not by 10 million actions." Now, I, with my limited thing, will like to break down Bhagavan's path. The Bhagavan teaching, the uniqueness of its amazing clarity, and about the practice of self-enquiry. And anything he would turn the devotee back to self-enquiry and bring it within the grasp of the understanding of even the common folks. So it's almost like for mathematicians in the group, it's almost like a theorem, how scientifically he goes one layer after layer. So the first is, he relentlessly brought our attention to the I thought. In Saddarshanam, verse 26, Bhagavan says, quote, "When the I thought arises, all things arise with it. When it does not, there is nothing else." I'm repeating what Swamiji said. Bhagavan taught us that the ego is nothing but just a bundle of thoughts, and at the root of which is the I thought. In deep sleep, when we are egoless and thought-free, there is bliss and harmony. Even the greatest tragedy or pain cannot touch us in that state. The moment we wake up, though, because of our vasanas or predispositions, the ego or I thought springs up, and from it springs up the entire world along with it, or samsara does. So Bhagavan says, for starting, pay attention intensely to this I thought. The next step, he asks us to go a little deeper by asking us to investigate the nature of this I thought. Again, to quote Bhagavan from Upadesasaram, verse 18, he says, "Thoughts alone make up the mind, and of all the thoughts, the I thought is the root thought, is the root. What is called the mind is but the notion I." Tamil uses the word moolam, that's the root. And again, to quote Saddarshanam, verse 25, he describes the I thought. "Holding a form, it arises. Holding a form, it stays. Holding and feeding on a form, it thrives. Leaving one form, it takes hold of another." So Bhagavan says that the I thought cannot exist on its own. It needs adjuncts, upadhis, to cling to for its existence. These adjuncts are names, forms, likes, dislikes, If we strip these adjuncts, there is nothing for the I to feed on. Because this is the energy that the I thought gets on. We give it energy, we give it life. So this gives us a clue as how to conduct vichara. So we should starve the I thought of all its props. Coming to the third step is exactly that, to isolate the I thought to its pure form. Bhagavan calls this aham vritti. The way to do this is by abhyasa and vairagya. So as Swamiji said, we have to do repeated practice. We'll keep slipping into ajnana, but hey, so what? We'll go back again. Because as Bhagavan said, we are all dhirans. The biggest quality a spiritual seeker needs to is to be a dhira, to be fearless and to be persistent. And so, and again, all scriptures also exhort these values. These are the values. If somebody succeeds in spiritual practice, they exhibit these two qualities. In Bhagavan's words, it is true wisdom for the mind to turn away from outer objects and behold its own effulgent form. Upadesasaram, verse 16. Coming to the fourth step, we are going to scrutinize the nature of the I thought, which now we have successfully isolated, and discover that it's the greatest imposter that has ever been created, because it never existed. And once we do that, what remains behind is not a state of dullness or blankness, but a state of pure awareness, a purna, no shunya, but extreme state of awareness, and which Bhagavan calls I awareness, where it's not associated with any thought. And the word Bhagavan uses for it is aham spurana. Aham spurana. Bhagavan's words again from Upadesasaram 17. When unceasingly the mind scrutinizes its own form, it will see that there is no such thing as the mind. This is the direct path, open for all. Open for all. This is Bhagavan's own words. This is a revolutionary declaration, emphasizing the uniqueness of Bhagavan's teachings. Bhagavan declares that the mind as we know it, or I, as we conceive it, are figments of imagination with no basis in reality. Coming to the fifth step, please stay with me, is to go a little deeper again, to search for the source of the spurious I thought or mind. I'll quote Bhagavan's sentinel teaching at the age of 21, the Who Am I book, and where it is more than who am I, it's more like whence am I, whence did this I thought spring up and from where? And again, to quote Bhagavan, when one turns within and searches whence this I thought arises, the I vanishes and wisdom's quest begins. This is from verse 19 Upadesasaram. And in Saddarshana, verse 29, he says, Cease all talk of I and search with inward diving mind whence the I thought springs up. This is the way of wisdom, to think instead, I am not this, but I am that, is helpful in the search, but it is not inquiry itself. And again, now it leads to the final step, and that is to find then what is the true I. And Bhagavan says, trace it back to the seat of the Atman, the Hridayam, and merge in it. That is the next verse of Saddarshanam, verse 30, quote. When the mind turns inward, seeking who am I, and merges in the heart, when it merges in the heart, then the spurious I bows its head in shame, and the true I, the one I, appears as itself. Though it appears as I, it is not the ego, it is reality, perfection, the substance of the self. This is aham bodham. For this last step of attaining samadhi in the heart to bear fruition, we need one important gift, the grace of the Guru. The grace of the Guru. We can strive along the path with complete earnestness, following its steps sincerely, but we must wait patiently for the final consummation of the mind and the heart by invoking the Guru's grace, by being worthy of the grace. And with the Guru's grace, we finally reach or become the real self, the heart, the Satchitananda, Brahman, eternal awareness, consciousness. So Bhagavan's Atma Vidya is therefore in essence Hridaya Vidya, the journey to reach this heart, the spiritual heart. It is the direct path that Bhagavan laid out for those who have the courage and the single-pointed determination to attain self-realization in this birth, not for the next one or the one next, this birth. And having the knowledge, why not? It's just a question of our sincerity and just our determination that will eventually lead in all of us getting that state. Marga Arjavat in Bhagavan's words. As sincere seekers and devotees, we all know that following his teaching is the most practical way to also lead a harmonious way, since it attacks all the problems at their root, the I thought. By the inquiry, who am I, or more precisely, whence am I, we stop identifying ourselves with the body and mind and turn inwards and find and merge with the true self. As Swamiji said, we then love everybody. There is no hatred, there is no jealousy, there is no room for the small I. We are happy at everybody's success. So we also, in reality, lead a beautiful external life while continuing this inward journey. That's the beauty of Bhagavan's and the Vedantic life. It's not a dichotomy. It's all in one. So as we go along, we better become humans too. Bhagavan also, as we all know, was always positive, no negativity about him. And he never denounced other paths such as seva, japa, dhyana, or puja. But he encouraged everyone to add self-enquiry to these practices. He asked us to turn our attention to the I who is chanting, the I who is meditating, the I who is worshipping. That is his direct path. The question then arises as how we can function in this world if we take to this practice. And again, Bhagavan in his death experience explains this, answers this question too. He says, other thoughts might come and go like various notes of music, but the I continues like the fundamental Shruti note that underlies and blends with all other states. It's state of Turiya, which underlies all the other states. And Bhagavan, in fact, uses the word Turiya Atita. We have to even go beyond Turiya. And so, all we have to do is to keep our focus on the fundamental I note while carrying on our prarabdha, the karmas we perform in this world. This way, the work allotted as per our prarabdha karma gets discharged naturally and efficiently. The beauty of Bhagavan's teachings is that he empowers everyone who comes to him to use their own present self-awareness as a powerful tool in the presence of self-realization. As Swamiji said, we are all carrying million-dollar diamonds within ourselves. So that is the energy what Bhagavan used, and thus turns our attention to it and makes us realize that. And because his experience was anubhavam, experience directly, he emphasized the focus was less on theory and completely on anubhavam, on practice, or the experience of the truth. To bring this home, Bhagavan often used the example of deep sleep. By drawing our attention to deep sleep, Bhagavan always used to bring our attention to the state of bliss that is the experience of all of us. And he used to describe the state, how we should be, he used to describe that state as Jagrat Shushupti. It's like we should all be in the world like a dream sleep. Dream awake. Maybe I'm quoting, yeah. So we are awake, but we are in the deep sleep state. That's how we go about our lives. The ultimate human goal is to try to replicate the experience of the waking state. So he brings the difficult to comprehend philosophical concepts like self-realization within the realms of experience and understanding. Again, to quote him, he says, in a dark room with no light, are you not aware that you exist? So that is the self-luminous nature of the awareness, that it is self-effulgent. We don't need external lights to know that we exist. And Again, by using that ever-present and ever-available feeling of awareness, Bhagavan provides a potent beacon that eventually leads us to our true self, something we can all relate to. Friends, I meet many teachers of Vedanta in the ashram. That's one of the highlights of my service. And wherever I go, the universal feedback is that Bhagavan's teachings represent the saram or essence of all our scriptures. Following his teachings allows us to taste the sweetness of the sugar inherent in Vedantic knowledge. As I outlined above, the sweetness of bliss is inherent in ourself and in our own heart. We don't have to go, we are all Kuberas, as Kunju Swamigal said. We are the richest people on this earth. Once we even get a small taste of this bliss inherent in us, we will stop looking outside, externally, for any fulfillment. The search is over. We have come home. In talks with Ramana Maharshi, Bhagavan says this beautifully. Quote, the mind being so long as a cow accustomed to grazing on the neighbor's field, he compares the mind to that because it's used to going, there is beautiful grass in its field, but it loves going out and chopping off the grass in the neighbor. So the keeper of the cow tempts the cow with luscious grass and fine fodder. Now she will refuse it the first time, then takes a bit, but her innate tendency is still to stray away, and it will keep asserting itself periodically. But when the cowherd is persistent and repeatedly keeps feeding the cow luscious grass, over time she accustoms herself to this stall. Finally, even if you don't lock this cow, it will not go out. Similarly, it is with the mind. Once it finds the inner happiness, it will not wander outward. The path is, of course, arduous, but it is made simple and, more importantly, joyful by His grace, which is eternal. The grace is eternal. It's still flowing. Bhagavan was never the body. He shines within all of us as our inner guru. More than 70 years after his samadhi, devotees increasingly from all over the world continue to feel his living presence. Now as then, he guides anyone who approaches him. To all who seek, he is here. Now I'll go to the second part of the topic, but which is just a little bit of the first part. Why he is the greatest spiritual teacher. Saints and sages who are the most normal people we know and who prefigure the evolutionary possibilities of the race fill us with deep joy, for they are faithful photographs of our own innermost selves and the patterns of the future outward perfection of all mankind. And as Swamiji said, they are like mirrors. They show us what we are. Sri Ramana, who was just clad in kaupina, had the air and the authority of a royal emperor. And his name still has the news value of a cinema star. When Kavyakanta Ganapati Muni, the great Sanskrit scholar, was living with Maharshi in 1908, he describes a phenomenon he observed. Something like a meteor appeared at dawn, touched Maharshi's forehead, retreated and came back and touched him 6 times. Again, as we all know, on that fateful night of April 14th, 1950, when Maharshi cast off his body, a bright meteor shooting over the ashram was seen by all and sundry all over southern India. Similar phenomena, flashes of light, visions, miraculous healing, had often been reported to Maharshi, but he brushed them off aside or gave simple and natural explanations of them and warned people not to think of such odd happenings, but to pursue the grand aim of self-realization, which is the biggest miracle, the biggest siddhi of all. In many books which describe his life and teachings, we get a wealth of views and varied views and impressions whose variety reflects the differences of several writers and the freedom of approach which Bhagavan not only permitted but welcomed in his devotees and disciples. His daily actions were the ultimate lessons in spirituality. To a question of the relationship between karma yoga and nishkama karma, he did not answer, but he kept polishing a wooden stick that was found, and in the manner of a Zen master, without uttering a word, he walked up the hill, picked up the stick and gave it to a shepherd boy who was roaming around having lost his stick. Then he said to the questioner, quote, "The making of the walking stick is karma yoga. The gift of it is nishkama. The sage did not make it or take it for himself. Similarly, we all know the making and eating of an appalam served as an allegory and a sacrament. He taught the most highest Upanishad truth in just the making of appalam, the papad. Apart from his spoken, acted, and written teachings, the simple human friendliness of Bhagavan showed the utter saulabhya, the easy accessibility of the ultimate truth when it graciously chooses to embody a human form. Bhagavan was not merely a yogi or a teacher or a saint. He was a seer, a being comprehending and transcending all these other categories. And he succeeded in being a friend of everyone, sinner or saint, prince or peasant, old or young, learned or ignorant, man or woman, cow, donkey, monkey, or peacock. Hundreds of quite ordinary visitors to the ashram were treated like intimate friends by Bhagavan, who took the most sympathetic interest in all their personal affairs. The train they came in, the food they ate, the marriage and deaths in their families, the appointments and promotions that occurred in their families. No one felt that she or he was unimportant or unwanted. Harijans were no less welcome than learned Brahmins to this charmed circle. To all he taught humility, without humiliating any, as he taught self-surrender without loss of freedom. He taught self-surrender without loss of personal freedom. If the good teacher is a friend who joins you where you are on your spiritual path and leads you up from that point to the mountaintop of truth, then Maharshi is the greatest teacher the world has ever seen. Because he refused to stretch us on Procrustean bed of creed of conduct. He convinced every one of his devotees and disciples that there are as many distinct ways of reaching the goal as they are unique human individuals. He said often is, the method is not important, the earnestness and the thing that you want will lead you eventually to goal. His more than mother-like tenderness made no harsh choice between one friend and another amongst the thousands of friends, and his steady, calm, unfailing cheerfulness and rock-like certainty spring from his conviction that the world process must end in the final release of all beings. In his conversation with children, birds, and animals, one noticed with envy the outflow of a more active, spontaneous grace, because no doubt these unspoiled creatures were more at home in his world of integral joy. Bhagavan, like a scientist, has invented and left behind for the scientists following him a technique of self-analysis which renders easy and aseptic that essential operation which destroys the mind and releases the spirit from its entanglement with the world and flesh. To quote B.V. Narasimha, his method is practical and scientific. He brings no supernatural power and demands no blind religious faith. The sublime spirituality of Maharshi's atmosphere and the rational self-questioning of his philosophy find but a faint echo in yonder temple of Arunachala. Even the word God is rarely on his lips. He advises, nay, warns every seeker not to set sail in the dark, debatable waters of wizardry in which so many promising voyages have ended in shipwreck. He simply puts forward a way of self-analysis which can be practiced irrespective of any ancient or modern theories and beliefs one may hold, a way that will finally lead man to self-knowledge. Bhagavan Ramana has no creed of his own because he is egoless. What we can learn from him is the application to religion of strictly scientific temper and the method of tentative, disinterested analysis. All beliefs are to be held only tentatively and never bigotedly, because all beliefs will one day be consumed in the fire of the experience of the self. The ego life is not life, but death. From this death of our ordinary life, we awake into immortality by passing in imagination through death of the body, as Bhagavan did in his 16th year by his dramatization of the body's death. The danger of mere rationalism is avoided by devotion to the holy and beloved person of the Guru. All the free will that we need can be exercised in the process of experiment and inquiry in the infinite variety of the application of the question of who am I, which can be used for every scene, every scenario. Bhagavan Ramana's simple message, quote, "The best way for one to serve the world is to win the egoless state. If you are anxious to help the world, but you think you cannot do so by attaining the egoless state, then surrender to God all the world's problems along with your own." It is open to a scientist to accept and apply and research and practice the sage's method of inquiry. It is open to a devotee, a bhakta, to surrender himself and his problems to the saint. And the saint and the sage in Bhagavan Ramana will gently draw the intellect of the one and the heart of the other towards the distant but inescapable goal of Satchitananda. Swamiji, to conclude, I would quote Swamiji's of Ramakrishna Mission order, who were blessed to see Bhagavan when he was in body. Swami Siddheshwarananda, head of Ramakrishna Mission Paris, had this to say of a meeting with Ramana, quote, "The Maharshi is a veritable lighthouse for those who wish to find in modern India the reviving effects of the teachings of the Upanishads consecrated by time." Swami Rajeshwarananda, a sannyasi of Ramakrishna order, and who we Bhagavan devotees need to be really grateful for. He edited the first journal of, along with Swami Chinmayananda, the journal of the ashram, the Call Divine, for the first 12 years of its existence. And his quote, "The gospel Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi solves the problems of mankind by the dynamic emphasis on the divinity of man. It moves all nations, all races, and the whole world to the one and the only self." Swami Ranganananda, for your personal connection, and the 13th president of Ramakrishna Mutt, and some of Bhagavan devotees know during a symposium, he admonished ego by saying, "Ego, go." And that was his order to marching orders to the ego. But to quote today, he said, "May all of us be worthy of this tremendous spiritual dynamo who enters our heart even without our knowing it." Friends, more than 1,000 years after Jagadguru Adi Shankara, in Bhagavan Ramana, we again see the living embodiment of pure consciousness the one ultimate reality as expounded by Hinduism's Advaita Vedantic philosophy. Like I always do, I like to end on a light note. In Sri Ramana Ashram, Bhagavan's ashram, it's the only place in the world where a devotee can work seamlessly towards two completely unrelated degrees in the external world, but who are interconnected in the spiritual world. And the degrees I'm referring to today is getting an MBA and an MD. MBA and MD. Well, the MBA I refer to is the mind-body alienation, and the MD is mind dissolution. Bhagavan helps us to alienate the mind and the body first, and once we are ripe, he guides us towards mind dissolution, the ultimate goal. May we all succeed in acquiring both degrees with distinction in this lifetime, is my prayer to you. And, Om Namo Bhagavate, Sri Ramanaya. Thank you for your attention.